The sun hung low over Wyoming territory like a vengeful eye as Sarah Turner stumbled the last quarter-mile to Benson Ranch. Blood trickled down her temple, mixing with the dust of 3 days' hard travel. She'd fled with nothing but the tattered dress on her back and the desperate hope that the ranch her cousin had mentioned in his last letter might offer sanctuary, if only for a night. April 1876 had been cruel to Sarah. At 22, she'd lost everything: her family home in Missouri to fire, her parents to influenza, and her dignity to the man who'd promised to be her protector. The bruises flowering across her arms and face were his parting gifts. The sprawling ranch materialized like a mirage as she crested the final hill. A dozen buildings dotted the landscape around the main house, smoke curling from the chimney despite the warm spring evening. 2 men on horseback spotted her from the fence line, and Sarah felt her legs finally give way beneath her. She awoke to rough hands lifting her, but they held her with unexpected gentleness. Through swollen eyes, she made out a weathered face framed by dark hair, concern etched in deep lines around piercing blue eyes. "Easy now, miss." The voice was deep, steady as bedrock. "You're safe here." Pain lanced through her side as he carried her toward the house. "My cousin," she managed through cracked lips. "James Turner. He said his friend owned this ranch." The man's stride faltered. "James was your kin. I'm Preston Benson. This is my place." His voice softened. "James rode with us until last winter. Pneumonia took him quick." Another loss. Sarah felt consciousness slipping away again, darkness pulling at the edges of her vision. "James was a good man," Preston continued, his voice fading in and out as he carried her up porch steps. "Any family of his is welcome here." The next time Sarah woke, she lay on a proper bed in a sparsely furnished but clean room. A window stood open, letting in the sweet scent of prairie grass and the distant lowing of cattle. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her ribs. "I wouldn't move just yet if I were you." An elderly woman with steel-gray hair bustled into the room carrying a basin of water. "Those ribs need binding, and that cut on your head wants stitching." "I'm sorry to be such trouble," Sarah whispered. "Nonsense. I'm Martha, the housekeeper here. Preston brought you in looking half dead 2 days ago." 2 days. Sarah tried again to rise, panic fluttering in her chest. Martha gently pressed her back. "The fever's just broke. Preston's been worried sick, checking on you every hour like a mother hen, though he'd skin me alive for saying so." "He didn't have to. That man's got more decency than most in these parts," Martha interrupted, dipping a cloth in the basin. "Now, are you ready to tell me who did this to you?" Sarah closed her eyes against the memory of fists and rage. "My husband, former husband." The words felt foreign on her tongue. "Edward claimed I was unfaithful. I wasn't." She swallowed hard. "He'd been drinking worse than usual, said he'd kill me this time. I believed him." Martha's hand stilled. "You ran. 3 nights ago." "Walked most of the way from Cheyenne after the stagecoach. My cousin wrote about this place last year. I had nowhere else to go." "Well, you're here now, and Preston Benson doesn't turn away folks in need." Martha resumed washing Sarah's face with practiced efficiency. "Rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger." Sarah drifted in and out of sleep throughout the day, waking fully when evening shadows stretched across her room. She became aware of someone sitting in a chair near the bed, a broad-shouldered figure silhouetted against the dying light. "Miss Turner." Preston leaned forward, his features coming into focus. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 30, with the kind of face that spoke of long days in the sun and wind. "Mr. Benson." Her voice sounded stronger than she felt. "I must thank you for your hospitality." "No thanks needed." "James was like a brother to me." He cleared his throat. "Martha says you're married. I left him. He'll be looking for me. Preston's jaw tightened. No man who leaves marks like that deserves the name of husband. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. You can stay as long as you need. We're 20 miles from town and not many strangers pass this way. Sarah studied his back, the tension in his shoulders. I can work. I'm not looking for charity. He turned, surprise evident in his face. That's for later. For now, you heal. His voice softened. James used to speak of his cousin back east, said she was smart as a whip and twice as determined. I see he wasn't exaggerating. I'm the only family he had left. Grief welled unexpectedly. I should have been here when he died. He wasn't alone. Preston's words were simple but carried weight. None of us are out here, not if we don't choose to be. When he left, Sarah lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, distant coyotes, the creak of timber, the occasional whinny of horses in the corral. For the first time in months, she didn't feel the need to sleep with one eye open. Days passed, and Sarah's strength returned gradually. Martha brought her clothes, simple dresses, and a pair of sturdy boots that had belonged to Preston's sister, who'd married and moved to Denver 2 years prior. By the end of the week, Sarah was able to make it downstairs to the kitchen. The ranch house was larger than it had appeared from outside, with a spacious central room where the ranch hands took their meals. Preston had built it himself after inheriting the land from his father, Martha explained as she showed Sarah around. 15 men work here full-time, the older woman said, plus seasonal hands during roundup. They bunk in the buildings out back. Only Preston and I live in the main house. It's a big operation, Sarah observed, watching through the window as men moved between the barns and stables. One of the biggest in the territory, Martha agreed. Preston's father started with nothing but 50 head of cattle and a dream. Now the Benson brand is known all the way to Chicago. That evening, Sarah joined Preston and 3 of his senior ranch hands for supper. The men were awkward at first, clearly unaccustomed to female company, but their innate courtesy prevailed. They spoke of cattle prices, breeding stock, and the coming summer roundup while Sarah listened, grateful for conversation that didn't revolve around her injuries or past. Preston said little during the meal, but she felt his eyes on her more than once. When the others had gone, he lingered at the table, turning his coffee cup in work-hardened hands. "Martha says you're healing well," he finally said. "Yes, thanks to both of you." "Good." He seemed to be weighing his words. "I've been thinking about what you said about working." Sarah straightened. "I meant it. I can cook, clean, mend, whatever's needed. We have Martha for that, and she'd have my hide if I suggested replacing her." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "But I could use someone to help with the books. James used to do it. He had education. Most of my men can barely sign their names, and He hesitated. "Numbers and I don't always agree." Hope flared in Sarah's chest. "I kept all the accounts for my father's hardware business. I can do that. It's not much, but it comes with room and board." He met her eyes directly. "And my word that no one will ever harm you here." The earnestness in his expression made Sarah's throat tighten. "I accept, Mr. Benson." "Preston," he corrected. "We don't stand on formality at Benson Ranch." The following morning, Preston showed Sarah to a small room off the main house that served as an office. Ledgers and papers were stacked haphazardly on every surface, and a fine layer of dust covered everything. "James kept it organized his own way," Preston explained, looking slightly embarrassed by the chaos. "After he died, I did my best, but—" He gestured helplessly at the disarray. Sarah rolled up her sleeves. "I'll need a day or two to sort through everything. Then we can establish a proper system." "Take whatever time you need." He hovered in the doorway. Sarah, about your husband, former husband, she corrected firmly. Right, should we be expecting trouble? I need to know if my men should be watching for someone. She considered lying, sparing him the complication, but something in his steady gaze demanded honesty. Edward has connections in territorial government. He's not the type to let go easily of what he considers his property. Preston's expression darkened. You're not property. To him I am. Or was. Sarah squared her shoulders. I won't bring danger to your door, Preston. If there's any sign of him, you'll stay right here, he interrupted, and we'll handle it. That's final. Before she could argue, he strode away, leaving her among the dusty ledgers with the distinct impression she'd just glimpsed something of Preston Benson's true nature beneath his quiet exterior. The work proved a blessing. Sarah lost herself in columns of numbers and inventory lists, finding comfort in their orderly progression. By the end of the week, she had organized the chaotic records into a comprehensible system, discovering in the process that Benson Ranch was even more prosperous than she'd realized. You've accomplished more in 5 days than I managed in 5 months, Preston said when she showed him the newly arranged office. Something like admiration warmed his typically reserved expression. The foundation was already there, Sarah replied. Your operation is impressive. I just put the pieces in order. James would approve. Preston picked up one of the ledgers, running a finger along the neat columns. He always said a ranch is more than cattle and land, it's a business that needs a clear head to survive. He was right. Sarah hesitated, then added, I found his handwriting throughout the older books. It helped me understand how he thought. Preston set down the ledger. I miss him. He was the one person I could talk to about anything. The admission, so simple yet clearly difficult for him, touched Sarah deeply. I think everyone needs that one person who truly sees them. Did you have that before? The question was gentle, without judgment. Sarah looked away. I thought I did. Edward was charming when we met. My parents had just died, and he seemed so strong, so sure of everything. She shook her head. The drinking started after we married. Then the accusations. Then the rest. Some men don't deserve the air they breathe, Preston said quietly. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about Preston Benson. He wasn't what she'd expected of a wealthy rancher, no bluster or self-importance, just quiet competence and unexpected depth. In the week she'd been conscious at the ranch, she'd seen how the men respected him not from fear but genuine loyalty. Even the newest hand spoke of Mr. Preston, with a reverence usually reserved for fathers or pastors. May bloomed across the Wyoming prairie, bringing wildflowers and longer days. Sarah settled into ranch life, expanding her duties beyond bookkeeping to help Martha with household management. The older woman seemed grateful for the assistance, especially as Roundup approached and the ranch population swelled with seasonal workers. 25 extra mouths to feed, all of them hungry as wolves, Martha complained good-naturedly as they planned menus. And Preston insists on feeding them properly, not just beans and hardtack like some outfits. He cares about his people, Sarah observed, having noticed how Preston knew every man by name, remembered details about their families, checked personally on anyone who fell ill. That he does. Martha gave Sarah a sidelong glance. He's watching out for you special, though. I've never seen him so attentive to a guest. Heat rose in Sarah's cheeks. He's being kind because of James. MMM. Martha's knowing smile suggested she believed otherwise. The man barely took dinner in the house before you came. Now he's washing up and changing his shirt every evening like he's courting. Martha, he's my employer. But Sarah couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach whenever Preston entered a room, or the way her day brightened when he sought her out to discuss ranch business. As if summoned by their conversation, Preston appeared in the kitchen doorway, hat in hand. "Sarah, I was wondering if you'd like to see more of the ranch. I need to check the north pasture, and it's a fine day for a ride." Martha shot Sarah a look that clearly said, "I told you so," before busying herself at the stove. "I'd like that," Sarah replied, ignoring the housekeeper's smirk. "Though I should warn you, it's been years since I've been on a horse." "I've got just the mount for you," Preston assured her, gentle as a lamb but sure-footed. An hour later, they rode side by side across rolling grassland dotted with spring wildflowers. True to Preston's word, Sarah's horse, a chestnut mare named Penny, required minimal guidance, following Preston's gelding with placid confidence. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, taking in the vista of mountains in the distance, the vast sky arching overhead. After months of fear and confinement in her married life, the open space felt like freedom incarnate. "Different from Missouri, I expect," Preston said. "Very. But there's something honest about this landscape. It doesn't hide what it is." Preston nodded as if she'd expressed something profound. "That's what drew my father here after the war. Said the mountains and prairie don't lie to a man or try to make him something he's not." They rode in comfortable silence until reaching a creek where cottonwoods provided welcome shade. Preston dismounted and helped Sarah down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a moment, they stood close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. He stepped back first, clearing his throat. "Thought we might rest the horses a spell before heading back." They sat on fallen logs while the horses drank from the creek. Preston produced apples from his saddlebag, offering one to Sarah. "James told me you were married back east," she said after taking a bite. "Is that why you understand what I've been through?" Preston's expression shuddered. "James talked too much sometimes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried." "No, it's all right," he sighed, looking out across the water. "Nancy and I were sweethearts since childhood. Married at 19 before I went to fight. When I came home, I was different. Nightmares. Anger." She tried to understand, but he shook his head. "One night I woke up with my hands around her throat, thinking she was an enemy soldier. I didn't hurt her, but I could have. The next day I packed my things and left." "You left her?" Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. "To protect her," Preston said simply. "I loved her too much to risk becoming the monster war had shaped me into. My father was already out here, so I joined him. Learned that working from sunup to sundown quiets the demons. By the time I had myself under control, Nancy had remarried." The pain in his voice was still raw despite the years that had passed. Sarah reached out impulsively, covering his hand with hers. "You did what you thought was right to keep her safe." "Maybe." His fingers curled around hers. "Or maybe I was just a coward, running instead of fighting for what mattered." "There's nothing cowardly about what you've built here," Sarah said firmly, "or how you care for everyone around you." His eyes held hers, something unspoken passing between them. Then the moment was broken by the distant sound of a rider approaching fast. Preston was on his feet instantly, tension radiating from him as he moved protectively in front of Sarah. She recognized the rider as Caleb, one of the younger ranch hands, pushing his horse hard across the grass. "Mr. Preston," the boy called before he'd even reined in. Riders coming up the main road, 5 of them asking for Mrs. Turner by name. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Edward," she whispered. Preston's expression hardened. "Caleb, take Miss Sarah back through the North Ridge Trail. It's longer, but they won't see you. Tell Martha to keep her in the house, away from windows." "What about you?" Sarah caught his arm, sudden fear gripping her. "I'll handle this." His voice was calm, but she saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "No one threatens what's mine." "I'm not yours," she said automatically, even as her heart contracted at the possessive declaration. For the first time since she'd met him, Preston smiled fully a wolf's smile, all teeth and determination. "You're under my protection on my land. That's enough for now." Before she could respond, he swung onto his horse and rode toward the ranch, leaving her with the agitated young ranch hand. "Please, miss," Caleb urged. "Mr. Preston will have my hide if I don't get you back safe." With a final glance at Preston's retreating figure, Sarah mounted Penny and followed Caleb along a winding trail through the hills. Back at the ranch, Martha was waiting anxiously on the back porch. "Inside, quickly," she instructed, ushering Sarah through the kitchen. "That no good husband of yours brought the sheriff and 3 hired guns." "The sheriff?" Sarah's stomach twisted. "Edward has friends in government. He might have convinced them I stole from him or worse." "Preston won't let them take you," Martha assured her, leading her upstairs to Preston's study, a room Sarah had never entered. "Wait here. I'll bring news when I can." Left alone, Sarah paced the room, taking in the details of Preston's private space. Unlike the functional office where she worked, this room revealed more personal aspects of the man. Books of poetry and philosophy lined shelves alongside practical volumes on cattle breeding and Wyoming law. A worn Bible sat on his desk, and photographs in simple frames showed people she assumed were his parents and sister. Most surprising was a small watercolor of wildflowers that hung above the fireplace, delicate and unexpected in this masculine domain. Sarah was studying it when the door opened and Preston entered, his expression grim. "Are you all right?" she asked immediately, searching his face for signs of confrontation. "I'm fine." He closed the door firmly. "Your husband is gone, for now. What happened?" "Martha said he brought the sheriff." Preston's mouth thinned to a hard line. "Sheriff Adams is a reasonable man, despite the company he keeps. Your husband claimed you'd stolen family heirlooms when you left." "That's a lie. I took nothing but the clothes I wore." "I know." Preston moved closer, his eyes intense. "The sheriff knows it too, but he had to investigate the accusation. I convinced him you're here legitimately as my employee, and he had no grounds to search the property or question you directly. Edward won't give up that easily. I'm counting on it." Something cold and determined flashed in Preston's expression. "Next time, he won't have the law as a shield." Sarah shivered at the implication. "I won't have you fighting my battles, Preston. These are my problems, not yours." The moment he set foot on Benson land with threats, they became my problems. Preston's voice softened. "Sarah, I promised you'd be safe here. I mean to keep that promise." "At what cost? Your reputation, your ranch?" She shook her head. "Edward has powerful friends. He could make trouble for you." Preston laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm in the tension of the moment. "Darling, I have 300 head of cattle, 25 armed cowboys, and enough land to hide an army. Let him try." The endearment slipped out naturally, hanging between them like a declaration. Sarah felt her resolve weakening under the weight of his certainty. "What did the sheriff say when he left?" "That your husband seems like the kind of man who gives decent husbands a bad name." Preston's mouth quirked. "And off the record, that if Edward Blackwood returns without legal cause, he might find himself delayed in responding to any complaints." "Blackwood?" Sarah frowned. "My husband's name is Edward Turner." Preston stared at her, confusion evident. "The man who came today called himself Edward Blackwood. Said you were Sarah Blackwood, his wife of 3 years. I've never heard that name in my life." Sarah sank into a chair, mind racing. "Edward Turner is my husband, or was. We married in St. Louis after my parents died. He's a businessman with interests in shipping and territorial contracts." "Describe him." "Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair going gray at the temples. He has a scar on his right cheek from a dueling pistol. He's proud of it, says it proves he's a man of honor." The irony wasn't lost on her. And he's at least 15 years my senior. Preston ran a hand through his hair, agitation evident. That's not the man who came today. This Edward was younger, maybe 30, no scar, claims you met in Kansas City and married against your family's wishes. It's not possible. Sarah felt dizzy with confusion. Why would someone pretend to be my husband? I don't know, but I intend to find out. Preston knelt beside her chair. Sarah, I need you to think. Is there anything about your situation, your real husband, your family, anything that might make you valuable to someone? She started to shake her head, then stopped as a memory surfaced. My father's business partner used to say our family property in Missouri would be worth a fortune once the new railroad went through. Edward was very interested in the deed after we married. When I wouldn't sign it over, he became persuasive. Where is the deed now? Hidden. I sewed it into the lining of my dress before I left. It's the one thing of value I have left. Preston's expression cleared. Then we have our answer. Your real husband sent this impostor to retrieve the deed without drawing attention to himself. A false husband claiming a runaway wife would gain sympathy, while Edward Turner showing his face might raise questions about your injuries. The revelation should have frightened Sarah, but instead she felt a strange relief. So the man today wasn't Edward. He hasn't found me yet. No, but he knows where to look now. Preston stood, decision made. We need to establish your legal standing. I'll ride to Cheyenne tomorrow, speak with Judge Wilson about filing abandonment papers. He's a fair man who despises men who abuse women. Abandonment requires witnesses, evidence. Sarah had researched divorce laws in desperate moments during her marriage. It's not simple. This is Wyoming territory, not Missouri. Preston's confidence was unwavering. The law here understands that sometimes justice needs flexibility. The judge will help us find a way. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah stood at her bedroom window looking out at the vast Wyoming sky. Stars scattered across the darkness like diamond dust, indifferent to human concerns below. The immensity of it made her problems seem smaller, manageable. A soft knock at her door pulled her from contemplation. Opening it, she found Preston standing in the hallway, still fully dressed despite the late hour. I saw your light, he said quietly. May I come in? Propriety dictated refusal, but Sarah stepped aside. With Martha sleeping downstairs and the ranch hands in their bunkhouse, they were effectively alone, a situation that would have scandalized her a year ago, but now felt strangely right. I couldn't sleep, she admitted as he entered, leaving the door ajar for the sake of appearances. Too many thoughts. I know the feeling. He remained standing near the door, respecting her space. I've been thinking about tomorrow. I want you to come with me to Cheyenne. Sarah raised her eyebrows in surprise. Is that wise? If Edward has men watching, that's exactly why you should come. Hiding keeps you safe temporarily, but establishing your legal independence protects you permanently. His eyes held her steadily. Besides, I want Judge Wilson to hear your story firsthand. There was logic in his argument, but Sarah sensed something more beneath it. What aren't you telling me? Preston sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. If we're going to petition for abandonment, it would strengthen the case if... He hesitated. If you had prospects, future security. Prospects? She frowned, not understanding. Marriage, he clarified, the word hanging between them like a physical thing. The judge would look more favorably on granting your freedom if he knew you weren't simply being cast adrift. Sarah's heart began to race. Are you suggesting a marriage of convenience? To whom? The look Preston gave her then was so naked in its vulnerability that Sarah felt her breath catch. To me, if you were willing. Preston, not immediately, he hastened to add. Just an understanding. Something to tell the judge that would ease his concerns about a woman alone in the territories. You would do that, Sarah whispered. Tie yourself to someone you barely know. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. I know enough. I know you're brave and resilient. I know you're intelligent and kind despite everything you've endured. His voice deepened. And I know that since you arrived at my ranch with nothing but bruises on your skin and fear in your eyes, I've wanted to show you gentleness. To prove that not all men are like the one who hurt you. The raw honesty in his words moved Sarah profoundly. Without thinking, she reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You've already shown me that every day. Preston caught her hand, turning it to press a kiss into her palm, a gesture so tender it brought tears to her eyes. Will you consider it? Not just for the judge's sake, but because he stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Because I find myself wanting your company in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't a declaration of love, but something about its halting sincerity touched Sarah more deeply than flowery protestations ever could have. This was a man unused to revealing his heart, yet he stood before her now, offering a future she hadn't dared imagine. I'll consider it, she promised softly, and I'll go with you to Cheyenne tomorrow. Relief and something warmer flickered across his face. Thank you. He stepped back, formal again. We'll leave at first light. It's best if we're not on the main roads too long. After he left, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, mind whirling. She'd fled one marriage only to find herself contemplating another mere weeks later. But everything about this situation about Preston was different from what she'd known with Edward. Where Edward had demanded, Preston offered. Where Edward had taken, Preston gave. Most importantly, where Edward had inspired fear, Preston awakened hope. Dawn broke clear and cool the next morning as Sarah and Preston set out for Cheyenne in a small buggy. Two ranch hands rode ahead as outriders, watching for trouble along the road. Preston drove with confident ease, his rifle within reach beneath the seat. We should reach town by midday, he told her as they left the ranch behind. I've arranged rooms at the Cattlemen's Hotel. Judge Wilson will see us tomorrow morning. The journey passed pleasantly, with Preston pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his early days in the territory. Sarah found herself relaxing despite the purpose of their trip, enjoying the simple pleasure of his company away from the ranch. You love this land, she observed as they stopped to rest the horses near a stream. It gets in your blood. Preston surveyed the rolling prairie with evident satisfaction. When I first came west, I thought I was running from something. Took me years to realize I was running toward my real life instead. I understand that feeling. Sarah gathered her courage. Preston, about what you suggested last night, you don't need to decide anything yet, he interrupted gently. I shouldn't have spoken so impulsively. It wasn't impulsive for me to listen. She met his eyes directly. I've had a lifetime of decisions made for me by others. This time I want to choose my own path. If the judge grants my petition and I'm legally free. She took a deep breath. I would consider your offer. Not as a convenience, but as a possibility for something real. The smile that transformed Preston's face made Sarah's heart skip. For a moment, he looked like he might pull her into his arms, but one of the ranch hands chose that moment to ride up with news of a wagon ahead on the road. Best we keep moving, Preston said, helping Sarah back into the buggy. But his hand lingered on hers longer than necessary, and the look they shared held promise. Cheyenne in 1876 was a study in contradictions, part frontier outpost, part aspiring metropolis. The territorial capital boasted both elegant hotels catering to Eastern investors and rough saloons serving cowboys fresh off the trail. As Preston guided their buggy down the main street, Sarah noted the mix of well-dressed businessmen and dusty ranch hands, of proper ladies and painted women. The Cattlemen's Hotel stood 3 stories tall, its brick facade and glass windows declaring its ambitions toward civilization. Preston handed the buggy to a livery boy and escorted Sarah inside, his hand hovering protectively near her elbow. "Mr. Benson." The clerk greeted Preston with evident respect. "Your rooms are ready, sir, and Judge Wilson left word that he can see you this evening instead of tomorrow if that suits." "That's excellent news," Preston replied. "Please send word we'll call on him after dinner." Their rooms were adjacent on the second floor, connected by a sitting room that allowed for private conversation. Preston ordered hot water brought up for washing and suggested Sarah rest before their meeting with the judge. "I've had a dress sent up," he added, gesturing to a box on her bed. "Martha mentioned your things were limited." Sarah opened the box to find a simple but elegant blue dress of fine wool, suitable for a respectable woman calling on a judge. "Preston, this is too much. It's not charity," he said firmly. "It's practical. We want Wilson to see you as the lady you are, not as a victim." She couldn't argue with his logic, though the gesture touched her deeply. After Preston left to speak with his ranch hands, Sarah bathed and changed, finding that the dress fit remarkably well. Martha must have provided measurements, she realized with a smile. Preston's appreciative gaze when she emerged made the new clothes worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Dinner in the hotel's restaurant was a quiet affair, both of them conscious of the importance of the evening ahead. As they finished, Preston reached across the table to touch Sarah's hand. "Whatever happens with the judge, you should know that my offer stands. Not from pity or duty, but because these past weeks have shown me what kind of woman you are." His voice lowered. "The kind of woman I would be proud to build a life with." Emotion tightened Sarah's throat. "Even with all my complications, especially with them, they've made you who you are." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Besides, a man who can't handle complications has no business ranching in Wyoming." The unexpected touch of humor broke the tension, and Sarah found herself laughing softly. "You're a surprising man, Preston Benson." Judge Wilson's house sat on a side street away from the bustle of downtown Cheyenne. A maid showed them into a book-lined study where the judge, a silver-haired man with keen eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, rose to greet them. "Benson, good to see you." He shook Preston's hand before turning to Sarah. "And this must be Mrs. Turner. Please, have a seat and tell me your situation." For the next hour, Sarah recounted her marriage to Edward Turner, the gradual escalation of his abuse, and her eventual flight. She presented the marriage certificate she'd kept hidden along with her property deed, and explained about the imposter who had come to the ranch. The judge listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grave. When she finished, he turned to Preston. "And your involvement, Benson? Miss Turner's cousin James worked for me until his death last winter. She came to my ranch seeking refuge, not knowing he had passed. I offered employment and protection." Preston's voice remained steady. "I intend to continue offering both, in whatever capacity she'll accept." The judge's shrewd gaze moved between them. "I see. And the nature of this protection going forward?" Preston met his eyes directly. "I've asked Miss Turner to consider becoming my wife once her legal situation is resolved." "Is this true?" Wilson asked Sarah. "Yes, Your Honor." She felt her cheeks warm but kept her head high. "Though we've agreed that decision comes after I'm free." Judge Wilson nodded slowly. "Good. Too many women leap from one marriage to another out of desperation. Time to know your own mind is valuable. He turned back to Preston. Your reputation speaks for itself, Benson. If half of what I've heard about Turner is true, the territory is better off without him. Relief washed through Sarah as the judge continued. Ordinarily, abandonment requires lengthy proceedings, but there are provisions in territorial law for cases involving abuse. He reached for paper and pen. I'll issue a preliminary order tomorrow separating your property and finances from Turner's control. After that, there's a waiting period before final dissolution. How long? Preston asked. 3 months, typically. But during that time, Mrs. Turner has legal protection from her husband. He cannot compel her return or seize her property. The judge's expression hardened. And should he attempt to harm her, he'll find Wyoming law takes a dim view of men who beat women. As they left the judge's house, Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. The night air was cool and clear, stars visible even through the glow of town lights. Preston offered his arm and she took it without hesitation. 3 months isn't so long, he said as they walked, though I expect it will feel like an eternity. Sarah glanced up at him. Are you so eager to be married again, to the right woman? Yes. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. I should have said this before. It's not just protection I want to offer you, Sarah. It's my heart. I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you opened your eyes in my house and looked at me without fear, despite everything you'd been through. The declaration, so unexpected yet so hoped for, left Sarah momentarily speechless. Preston misinterpreted her silence, his expression clouding. I understand if you don't feel the same. After what you've endured, Sarah reached up and pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. Don't presume to tell me what I feel, Preston Benson. That's what Edward did. She softened the words with a smile. What I feel is too new and precious to name fully yet, but it's growing stronger every day, and it makes me believe in possibilities I'd thought lost forever. The kiss that followed was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When Sarah responded, moving closer within the circle of his arms, Preston deepened the kiss with restrained passion that spoke of both desire and respect. A passing wagon broke the moment, reminding them they stood on a public street. Preston stepped back, but kept hold of Sarah's hand as they resumed walking toward the hotel. We should return to the ranch tomorrow, he said. I don't trust this calm. Edward, the real Edward, is still out there, and he knows where to find you now. Sarah nodded, sobered by the reminder. The deed is still the key. Once he realizes his imposter failed, he'll try another approach. Let him try. Preston's voice held steely confidence. We'll be ready. The ride back to Benson Ranch the following day was tense, all of them watchful for signs of trouble. They had just passed the halfway point when one of the ranch hands rode back from his forward position, face grim. Riders up ahead, Mr. Preston. At least 4 men, waiting where the road narrows through the rocks. Ambush, Preston said flatly. He turned to Sarah. We'll leave the road, circle around through the hills. It's rougher terrain, but we know it better than they do. For the next 2 hours, they picked their way through brush and gullies, avoiding the main trail. Sarah marveled at Preston's knowledge of the landscape, how he found passages where none seemed to exist. By mid-afternoon, the familiar silhouette of Benson Ranch appeared in the distance. We made it, Sarah breathed. Don't celebrate yet. Preston's expression remained vigilant. They'll realize we've bypassed them soon enough. His caution proved warranted. As they approached the ranch, a rider came galloping from the direction of the main house. It was Caleb again, his young face taut with urgency. Mr. Preston, Martha sent me to find you. There's men at the ranch, 6 of them. Leader says he's Edward Turner and he's come for his wife. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Preston's arm went around her shoulders, steadying her. Is Martha all right? The men? Yes, sir. Mr. Cooper and the boys have them contained in the yard. They haven't tried anything yet, but they're armed. Preston's mind worked visibly. Caleb, take Miss Sarah to the line cabin by North Creek. Stay with her until I come or send word. He turned to Sarah. It's one of our boundary shelters, basic but secure. You'll be safe there. No. Sarah straightened her spine. I won't hide while you face danger for me. This is my fight. Sarah, I ran from him once. I won't spend my life running. Her voice softened. Besides, we both know he'll keep coming unless we end this now. Preston studied her face, clearly torn between protection and respect for her decision. Finally, he nodded. Stay close to me. If things turn ugly, you get to cover immediately. Promise me. I promise. They approached the ranch slowly, giving Sarah time to prepare herself for the confrontation ahead. As they rounded the final bend in the road, the tableau in the ranch yard came into view: 6 mounted men facing a semicircle of Benson ranch hands, tension crackling between them like lightning before a storm. At the center of the visitors sat a man Sarah recognized instantly, despite the years that had changed him. Edward Turner had lost weight since she'd seen him last, and his once immaculate appearance had given way to something harder, hungrier. But the scar on his cheek and the cold calculation in his eyes were unmistakable. Sarah. Her name in his mouth still had power to chill her blood. You've led me on quite a chase, my dear. Preston helped her down from the buggy, keeping her slightly behind him as they faced the intruders. You're trespassing, Turner. Judge Wilson has issued orders regarding your wife. She's under the law's protection now. Edward's laugh held no humor. Territorial judges have limited jurisdiction, especially when influenced by lies. His gaze shifted to Sarah. Did you tell your cowboy protector about the asylum, dear wife? How the doctors confirmed your delusions, your tendency toward hysteria and fabrication? There was no asylum, Sarah said clearly, forcing strength into her voice. Just as there was no Edward Blackwood. More lies to add to your collection. Mrs. Turner suffered a breakdown after her parents' deaths. Edward continued smoothly, addressing Preston as if Sarah hadn't spoken. Her mind created elaborate fantasies of abuse to explain her self-inflicted injuries. I've been searching for months to bring her home for proper care. That's enough. Preston's voice cut through the charade. Your man already tried this approach in Cheyenne. Judge Wilson has Sarah's testimony and documentation of your marriage and property. The law stands with her, not you. Edward's facade cracked slightly, annoyance flashing across his features. You're interfering in matters that don't concern you, rancher. Sarah concerns me. Preston's hand moved to rest on his holstered pistol, as does anyone who threatens what's mine. The declaration hung in the air, shifting the dynamic perceptibly. Edward's eyes narrowed as he reassessed the situation. I see. You found yourself a protector with land and money. Clever girl. Does he know about the property deed you stole? The deed is mine by inheritance, Sarah replied. And yes, Preston knows everything about me and my situation. That's the difference between him and you, Edward. He listens to the truth instead of creating convenient lies. Something dangerous flickered in Edward's expression. I won't leave without what's mine. The only things here that belong to you are the horse you rode in on and whatever's in your saddlebags, Preston said evenly. Take them and go, while that's still an option. Edward's hand twitched toward his gun, and instantly 20 rifles leveled at him and his men. Even with 6 guns of their own, they were hopelessly outnumbered. For a tense moment, Sarah thought Edward might choose violence regardless of the odds. Then his shoulders relaxed, and a cold smile spread across his face. "Very well. It seems I'm outmatched today." He turned his horse, signaling his men to do the same. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts. This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Sarah called after him, finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Whatever scheme you're planning next, whatever lies you're preparing, save your energy. I won't be manipulated or frightened any longer." Edward didn't reply, but the rigid set of his back as he rode away told Sarah her words had struck home. They watched in silence until the riders disappeared down the road, Preston's arm steady around Sarah's waist. "He'll be back," she said quietly, "or he'll try another approach. Let him." Preston turned her to face him. "We'll be waiting, together." The promised 3 months passed with agonizing slowness. True to Sarah's prediction, Edward made 2 more attempts to reclaim her, first through legal channels, filing countering petitions in territorial court, then through more direct means when a night rider attempted to break into the ranch office where property records were kept. The legal challenges were dismissed by Judge Wilson, who had taken a personal interest in the case. The night rider was caught by Preston's men, and under questioning revealed he'd been hired to find and destroy Sarah's deed to the Missouri property. "The railroad's offering 10 times market value for that land now," Preston told her after the man was turned over to the sheriff. "That's why Edward's so desperate. He needs your signature on that deed." "He'll never get it," Sarah vowed. "And once our divorce is final, I'll sell the land myself and be completely free of any connection to him." By August, the heat of summer lay heavy across the prairie, and the ranch busied itself with preparations for the fall cattle drive. Sarah had fully integrated into ranch life, expanding her role beyond bookkeeping to help with correspondence, supply ordering, and planning for the ranch's future. Preston, true to his word, had been patient, never pressing for more than Sarah was ready to give. Their growing relationship unfolded naturally through shared work, conversations on the porch in the evening, and occasional rides across the property that allowed them privacy to speak of more personal matters. On the day Judge Wilson's final decree arrived by courier, Sarah found Preston in the corral, working with a young colt. Seeing her approach with the official envelope, he climbed through the fence rails to meet her. "Is that it?" he asked, wiping his hands on his denims. Sarah nodded, hardly believing the moment had finally arrived. Judge Wilson granted full dissolution. "I'm legally free and the Missouri property is confirmed as mine alone." Preston's eyes searched her face. "How do you feel?" "Relieved." "Grateful." She looked up at him, heart suddenly racing. "Ready?" "Ready." A smile began to form at the corners of his mouth. "For what exactly?" "For whatever comes next." She took a step closer. "For building something new with someone who understands the value of gentleness." Preston reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with calloused fingers. "I believe I made you an offer some months back. Does it still interest you?" "It might." Sarah couldn't help teasing him a little, enjoying the lightness in her heart. "Though I'd prefer to hear it again, just to be certain of the terms." Without hesitation, Preston dropped to one knee in the dusty ranch yard, heedless of the curious glances from nearby ranch hands. "Sarah Turner, I love you. I have since the moment you arrived at my ranch with nothing but bruises and determination. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife, my partner in all things?" Tears blurred Sarah's vision as she looked down at this man who had rewritten her understanding of what love could be. "Yes, Preston Benson, 1,000 times yes." The wedding took place 2 weeks later on the ranch, with Judge Wilson making the journey from Cheyenne to officiate. Martha transformed the main house with wildflowers and ribbons, while the ranch hands constructed tables and benches for the feast that would follow the ceremony. Preston's sister, Catherine, came from Denver with her husband and children, embracing Sarah with genuine warmth. "He wrote so much about you in his letters," she confided. "I haven't seen my brother this happy since before the war." Neighbors from surrounding ranches arrived throughout the morning, bearing gifts and well wishes. By noon, over 50 people had gathered in the shade of the cottonwoods where Preston had constructed a simple arch entwined with late summer blooms. Sarah wore a dress of ivory silk that Catherine had helped select in Denver. As she walked toward Preston, who waited beneath the arch in a new black suit, she felt the weight of her past finally lift completely. Edward and his threats, the fear and pain of her first marriage, all faded against the reality of the man before her and the future they would build together. "You look beautiful," Preston whispered as she reached him. "So do you," she replied with a smile, taking his offered hand. Judge Wilson's ceremony was brief but meaningful, acknowledging the unusual path that had brought Sarah and Preston together, while celebrating the strength of the bond they'd formed. When Preston slipped a gold band onto Sarah's finger, one that had belonged to his mother, his hands were steady, but his eyes revealed the depth of his emotion. "By the authority vested in me by Wyoming territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Wilson declared. "What adversity has brought together, let no man tear asunder." Preston's kiss was gentle yet passionate, a promise of all that awaited them. When they turned to face their guests, the ranch hands erupted in cheers and whistles, their usual reserve abandoned in celebration. The party lasted well into the night, with music from fiddles and harmonicas, dancing in the yard, and enough food to satisfy even the hungriest cowboy. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting golden light across the gathering. Near midnight, Preston found Sarah sitting on the porch steps, watching the revelry with contented exhaustion. "Ready to escape?" he asked, offering his hand. She took it, allowing him to pull her to her feet. "Where to? I have a surprise." He led her away from the house, down a path toward the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the ranch compound. As they rounded a stand of trees, a small cabin came into view, lamplight glowing in its windows. "What's this?" Sarah asked, confused. The building hadn't been there a month earlier. "Our home," Preston replied. "At least until we decide if we want something larger. I thought you might appreciate having our own space, separate from the main house." Overcome, Sarah walked up the 3 steps to the porch, noting the care evident in every detail: the smooth planed railings, the rocking chairs positioned to catch the morning sun, the wildflowers planted along the walkway. Inside was equally thoughtful, a cozy sitting room with bookshelves already filled with volumes from Preston's collection, a kitchen with new cookware hanging from hooks, and beyond, a bedroom where a quilted bed waited, turned down invitingly. "You did all this in 2 weeks." Sarah turned to find Preston watching her anxiously. "The men helped. We've been working on it every spare moment." He hesitated. "Do you like it?" In answer, Sarah crossed to him, rising on tiptoes to press her lips to his. "It's perfect. Our own beginning." As Preston's arms encircled her, drawing her closer, Sarah felt the last pieces of her heart heal and reform into something stronger. The woman who had arrived at Benson Ranch with nothing but bruises had found not just safety but love, a love built on respect, understanding, and the gentle hands of a man who saw her value and her strength. "Welcome home, Mrs. Benson," Preston murmured against her hair. Sarah smiled, knowing the words held much more than a reference to the cabin. Home wasn't the building around them, but the life they would create together. It's good to be home at last. Spring 1883 brought new life to Benson Ranch. 7 years of marriage had seen the operation grow from successful to prosperous. With additional land purchased, the cattle herd nearly doubled, and a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far as Chicago. The cabin by the creek had expanded twice to accommodate the Benson family's growth. First James, now 6, named for Sarah's cousin who had indirectly brought them together. Then Emma, 4, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. The newest addition, Thomas, slept peacefully in his cradle as Sarah worked at her desk in the office she and Preston now shared. The Missouri property had sold for an amount that exceeded even Edward's greedy expectations, providing capital that Preston and Sarah had invested wisely in ranch improvements. Edward himself had eventually abandoned his pursuit, moving to California after his business interests in Wyoming collapsed under the weight of scandal when his fraudulent practices came to light. "Mama," James burst into the office, excitement radiating from him. "Papa says the new foal is ready for me to name. Will you come see?" Sarah set aside her ledger with a smile. "Of course. Let me get your brother." As she lifted Thomas from his cradle, Sarah glanced out the window to where Preston stood in the corral with Emma on his shoulders, pointing out something to their daughter. The sight still filled her heart with gratitude after all these years. This good man who had taught her that love should lift rather than diminish, support rather than control. Outside, the Wyoming spring sunshine warmed her face as she carried Thomas toward the barn. Preston spotted her and smiled, that same smile that had first begun to heal her wounded heart years ago. "Come see what your son has picked for a name," he called, setting Emma down to run to her mother. "I hope it's more creative than what he named the barn cat," Sarah teased, remembering the orange tabby that James had solemnly christened Cat. Preston laughed, the sound still her favorite music after all this time. "Slightly better. Though I'm not sure Thunder Lightning Fast Horse will fit on the breeding records." As they walked together toward the barn, Preston's arm around her waist and their children dancing ahead, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate woman fleeing abuse to the confident ranch mistress and mother she'd become, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. Yet it wasn't a miracle that had saved her, but the steady hands and patient heart of a man who understood that healing required gentleness. Preston had promised to show her what love should be, and every day since, he had kept that promise. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Sarah smiled up at the man who had become her partner in all things. "I'm thinking about promises kept, and about how sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations." Preston's eyes softened with understanding. Leaning down, he brushed his lips against hers in a kiss that still held all the tenderness of their first. "Welcome home, Sarah," he whispered, as he had on their wedding night. And as their children called impatiently for them to hurry, Sarah took her husband's hand and stepped forward into the life they had built together, a life founded on respect, strengthened by challenge, and sustained by the enduring power of gentle love.